hope you're all refreshed. On to what I consider to be one of the exciting parts of the day is to actually get real-world perspective on the topic of the day, one of the key topics on network transformation. And we have the opportunity to have a few folks from the industry, a good spectrum, if you will. And I'd like to have them come on up, and I'll introduce them as they do come up here, and we can talk about from a panel and have a few questions. So if you guys come on up and take a seat. And the idea here is again, to have a good discussion on what's happening in real life from a number of different areas or perspective. And I will go ahead and introduce the panel here, and then we'll have questions at the end. So joining us today, to my immediate right, we have Bill Jones, Vice President of Enterprise Data Center Services. He's responsible for managing delivery of overall IT structure, which includes network as a key component of that. And we'll hear Bill's perspective here, which I think it will be real rewarding for us all. And to Bill's right, we have Adam Singer, Vice President of CenturyLink, and he's overall responsible for the global networking solutions. So we'll hear that perspective. And then to Adam's right, we've got Yazdi Kapadia. And Yazdi is an account chief technology officer for one of the BT's America's largest clients in the region, and has, I know, a very good perspective on what's happening in overall network transformation there. And to Yazdi's right, we have Jason Gallo, and Jason is the senior director of overall EN networking at Cisco, a well-known name in the industry. And I'm sure we're going to get some great perspective there. And rounding out our panel on the right, we have Michael Pomerantz. He's a Senior Business Development Manager for Velocity. And if you haven't read yet, Velocity is the greatest phone company ever.
Incorporated.
Yeah, incorporated, exactly. It has been incorporated. So as you can see, again, a good perspective and spectrum for us to address overall networking technology transformations. And let me just start off with a couple of well, just initially, the question just relative to changing requirements in the network and in supporting some of the things we've heard relative to a lot of change and what's happening in those networks and how those networks are supporting changing business requirements. What do we see as the catalyst right now from your perspective in those changing environments? And I'll start with you, Bill, just
Sure.
From your client perspective.
I think it was talked about earlier. Definitely move to the cloud is key for us, getting ahead of that. I was telling the guys earlier, we have probably over 150 different SaaS applications that we use today. So we're, technically speaking, we're already in the cloud from a public standpoint. That's one of them. Another big one that we've really been pushing is obviously cost takeout. And we've been able to do that a number of different ways, which we can talk about a little bit with respect to SD-WAN, not only on broadband, but renegotiating our current transport contracts today and reconfiguring the network as we go. So.
Okay, and just a follow-on thought there, Bill, just you mentioned the cost takeout, and we've heard about that as one of the leading drivers, and you just reinforced that. Have you seen that come true or be true relative to your original business case?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the journey for us has been, at least on the WAN, for the last 2 years. As I was saying earlier, we started with WAN optimization, 2016, implemented Riverbed, and saw really significant optimization, reducing capacity utilization on our WAN, which was great. So from that point, we pivoted to, hey, look, let's look at port reductions, access speed reductions, reconfigure the network in preparation for what we have in process right now is a data network RFP. And in parallel to that, we started the deployment of SD-WAN. So we've got a number of things going on, but just with the reconfiguration and what we've put out in our RFP, where we've reduced the port speeds, we're adding broadband, taking out MPLS, not completely, basically a fraction of the MPLS will go away. We've seen significant cost reductions. Wow. Yeah,
Okay, so far so good
Yeah.
from a client perspective.
yeah, absolutely.
Adam, just from your perspective, what are you seeing with your clients, and what's been the driver for transformation?
So one of the drivers that we're seeing is really the cloudification of our lives, right? And whether that's the digital business or the digital home, data resides within the cloud. And so that has caused us to do a double click down on what's driving the cloudification of our lives. And really it's data at the source. And so what we're seeing is we're really into kind of the fourth revolution, right? If you look at, you got coal, electricity, the semiconductor, now data is at the center of everything that we're doing. And the network is critical to be able to do the three things with data that will differentiate any organization. And that is to acquire that data, analyze the data, and be able to act on it. And if you can rapidly do that, you will differentiate yourself in the marketplace. You look at any enterprise organization, whether it's retail, whether it's the financial services industry, healthcare, data is both it's necessary. I'll call it a necessary evil from the standpoint of having to protect that information and use it in a new and differentiated way, and using the network or leveraging the network to access that information and be able to present that out to your user community, whether that's an employee from an employee experience perspective or the enterprise from the enterprise user perspective, is crucial and is really driving this next generation of the enterprise and overall IT infrastructure.
Okay, Yazdi, from your perspective on your client.
Yeah, sure. So I generally work with pharmaceutical clients as well as consumer products groups, and flexibility is one of the big concerns that they have, and flexibility from a mergers or a partnership or a demerger or any type of acquisition. Typically we see 2 to 3 partnerships develop or acquisitions each year. And the challenge has always been, well, how do we make 2 complete independent companies suddenly work together securely and quickly? It's got to be very quick. In the past, the last few years, we've always put in custom solutions based on CLI commands, lots of security, to make sure that company A still manages to get to company A's network, company B manages to get to company B's network, but the 2 of them can share data securely as well. I think the promise of SD-WAN should make that a lot faster, a lot simpler, and a lot more secure. That's where we're hoping.
And Yazdi, are you seeing your clients actually start to make those steps, investing in the new technology?
Absolutely, because one of the key things in pharmaceuticals is time to market, and the faster they can start those partnerships off to start the research and development means the faster they'll eventually get a drug out to market.
Right. Okay. All right, Jason, from a Cisco perspective.
Oh, sure. So I think what we're seeing is a move to what we're calling a secure, intelligent platform. And we've really been focused on adding security into the network itself. Like, how do you embed the ability to look at encrypted traffic, right, as a part of the flow? How do you then layer on an ability to have the right level of automation that allows, some of that ask that we've had from our customers and our partners to take out some of the costs by having better automation strategy. And then the last piece being the platform, so secure, intelligent platform. And the platform, I think we've kind of heard it here, is a level of customization. And don't just provide me a set of products that are closed, allow me to tailor that specifically to my vertical or my use case so that I can embed it into my workflows. And so again, our strategy has really been making a network transformation that brings about a secure, intelligent platform.
Great, thanks, Jason. So, on the perspective of a provider, Michael, from your standpoint, how is Velocity approaching it? What are they seeing in terms of clients looking for change and making that change?
Sure. Well, we work a lot in the hospitality industry, and from a hospitality standpoint, we're seeing that need for bandwidth increasing. I mean, you can imagine a lot of children carrying around tablets that they're streaming all their games and their TV on. Multiply that by 100 in a hotel, right? So the need for bandwidth goes up, not only from that perspective, the guest Wi-Fi perspective, but also to run their back office systems and their VoIP. So, I mean, you have 2 avenues that you can go down. You can either take a look at an SD-WAN solution and an SD-WAN deployment, or you can purchase massive fiber circuits. I mean, if you look at surveys from hotel guests, guest Wi-Fi is the #1 thing that they're concerned about. It's not, back 10, 15 years ago, it used to be, what TV or are you serving breakfast? So it's bandwidth is #1 right now with our customers.
Got it. Capacity, flexibility, cost savings.
Absolutely.
All the things that have been advertised. It sounds like there's been some implementation along those lines for all of those. So the promise is there, it sounds like. Adam, from your perspective, and clients making the first step into SD-WAN. The SD-WAN, again, it sounds like everybody's looking at it, wanting to adopt it. What's a first step for some of your clients?
So we've actually seen the first step shift
Okay.
over the last 12 to 15 months. And SD-WAN is a point solution that if it's enabled or implemented as a point solution, it's just yet another thing to manage. CenturyLink thinks about it differently. We think about it as a overarching hybrid networking solution that includes SD-WAN as a technology solution out on the prem. It includes the networking component that can be any combination of private networking, think MPLS, think high capacity fiber solutions, direct fiber waves. It can include public connectivity, dedicated internet, broadband, wireless, all the things that we've talked about yet this morning. Those things combined generate the opportunity to be more efficient. And so, and whether that's grow efficiently geographically, grow or scale from a bandwidth perspective into a given facility, or add redundancy or resiliency to a network. So that shift that's taken place, we were seeing customers test the technology 12 to 15 months ago. Today they're testing the operating model. How do those things come together? How do they work together? Not only from an implementation standpoint, but an ongoing operational perspective. How are changes made? And so as those things come together, one of the promises of SD-WAN is a self-control. What we're seeing is there's really a finite number of self-control functions that customers want to make on their own. The others, they want to partner with a service provider like CenturyLink or other managed service provider to help them along that journey, because it is a journey. It's not just implement it and be done. We'll continue to see that journey shape, right? With move to 5G. As clients, we were talking earlier about the sensitivity of data, right? And the necessity for security and privatization of that data. Security is not a standalone thing, but it has to be embedded in the overarching hybrid networking solution. And so that shift from a point solution to how is it from a managerial perspective being run is critical. And so we're seeing that shift in the enterprises that we're talking to.
Interesting. Jason, in terms of just again the Cisco perspective, where a majority of clients obviously are using Cisco today, where are you seeing those clients make that initial shift toward software-defined network?
Yeah, so I think it's right, your point about it being a hybrid environment. I don't think anyone is switching away from MPLS, just kind of cut and move. I do think also that as more and more of the clients get into it, they realize that there is a lot of benefit to working with some of our service provider partners. And I saw a slide up earlier where you can separate the management and the transport. I think that's true, but at the same time, I think a lot of our service provider partners provide great benefits in terms of the ability to manage functions that you may not otherwise want to have to staff up or have the capabilities within your department or your IT departments or customers' IT departments. The other thing, though, I think that we're seeing is an ability to have a conversation or have an understanding of the vendor that's going to give you the right level of security. Again, kind of back to that secure, intelligent platform. What happens is I think customers get into a situation where they say, well, I want to deploy this at all of my branches, but I just moved from one central controlled location where everything was coming back to my data center. That felt powerful. I could control that. But now in SD-WAN, every branch is kind of going a different direction, right? Do I lose control? That's kind of a question that comes up. And what's unique actually about our solution is, without getting too technical, is you do get into an ability to control what we call a control plane, completely separate from the data plane. And the ability to authenticate in different places is something that's really unique to our solution. But I think asking those questions around and making the customers understand that it's the security that's going to be the differentiator when you split apart how your transport is working. And then lastly, again, we talk a lot about the platform element, but the ability to open up in a simple way as well. Simplicity has to be the key. And that's where we think a lot of the platform element and integrating that in, not just our service providers, but our other partners who are more solutions or systems integrators, are tying that back into your management tools and systems, your ticketing systems. We're able to tie in some of these SD-WAN solutions in a way we've never had before, but that increases monitoring and visibility. So I think those are some of the key things: security, monitoring, visibility, and simplicity.
Okay, thanks, Jason. Bill, just from your perspective, how you mentioned you're going down the SD-WAN journey, and how would you describe where you're at, but also how did you start into it? What was the first step for you and your team?
It goes back to the changes we wanted to make on the network. Again, just looking at capacity utilization, we knew SD-WAN was a great opportunity out there. I didn't say it. We're piloting 12 sites right now. To Adam's point earlier, really what we're trying to do is gain operational experience with the providers we have today. We went beyond. We have AT&T, Verizon as the primary providers for MPLS today. As I said, we've got an RFP that we're going through the process now for the entire data network to include MPLS and broadband. So we want to have experience with the broadband. We know how things have worked operationally with MPLS and the way that we've designed it. One of the big lessons learned, I think I said earlier, is we're having a hard time getting broadband circuits from the providers. AT&T, Verizon, Comcast, we're getting MPLS faster than we can get broadband in for a number of different reasons. And Verizon, it's a new business. Business broadband is new for them. So we've asked, in the response to the RFP, you can bid on just MPLS or just broadband. We prefer you bid on both. And that's what we're aiming to do in terms of the evaluation. But we're just very early in terms of getting operational experience. And to Jason's point, we're way ahead of our security group. They're still, working through their solution and looking at security as a service, potentially either using Zscaler or Palo Alto. Right now, our design is everything's going to continue to backhaul back through the data center. Okay. It's all our internet, our internet infrastructure, and of course all the security solutions are in the data center. So we know we'll change that either DIA or whatever, but we'll go out from our branch offices directly to the internet at some point. But right now, we don't have a solution for that.
Okay, so you're in testing. How long do you think the testing process will take you in reaching a conclusion?
It's really we've come to this juncture right now with the RFP that we wanted to get much more lessons learned from the piloting to apply to the RFP and the decision making. We want to have the RFP completed by Thanksgiving. And the team, I was just on a call this morning, the team wants to go order another 12 to 24 broadband circuits because they're worried how long it's taking to provision, that we're getting way behind on our pilot and our operational deployment, which I said, no, we got to get the RFP done first. So
migration to an SD-WAN solution probably later next year?
Well, in terms of functional,
full function.
Yeah, full function, it'll be next year for sure. Okay. But in the pilot sites, we have that capability today.
Right now. Okay. Yeah. All right. Michael, just on from your perspective, some of the clients that are looking at, I know you actually, as a backbone solution or a core solution, you do use SD-WAN today.
Yes,
right?
Correct. So we have our own SD-WAN platform that was proprietary, developed in-house. I think to Bill's point, you have to be very aware of where your sites are located and your access to those broadband circuits, because a government permit at half of your sites, that could slow down that installation, and it could extend it into months and months and months. We all know how slow the government is at getting to things like that. But one of our customers, who's a major motel chain that's owned and operated by Blackstone, they decided to move forward with an SD-WAN implementation, and they focused on that cable footprint, right? We want to get a 50 meg by 5 meg minimum bandwidth in first, and then look to those diverse secondary circuits, DSL, wireless 4G, wireless point-to-point. It went very well, but you still have that install time that you're waiting on. So you have to be aware of that when you make that decision. I mean, obviously, they were able to disconnect all their old, slow, costly T1 circuits in the end, and it saved them a lot of money, but it does take some time.
Right. And when would you say you, as a company, adopted SD-WAN technology, and how was that experience just internally?
Well, we've been doing dynamic routing and load
Yeah.
balance technology in the hospitality and retail space for a number of years.
Yeah.
We probably adopted that SD-WAN technology about 2.5 years ago,
Okay.
started working on it.
Okay. Got
So it's going very well so far.
Yeah.
But, there are some hiccups along the way with the availability factor.
Right. And I'm sure you have a lot of software engineers now that are working on stuff.
Yes, a lot. Round the clock.
Yazdi, in terms of your client, the migrations, the tests, how are those working for you?
Yeah, so our client has started off with, if you like, the quick wins. So it's more of an internet offload. What can we push out to the internet directly from the site? And so it's typically things like Microsoft traffic, because that, number one, is very easy to measure. So you know exactly 40% of your traffic, for example, is going to Microsoft, whether it's Office 365 or Azure. So you know that by pushing that out the internet, you can reduce 40% off your relatively expensive MPLS links. So that's a quick win. And it's also good from a security perspective as well, because the security team like it. They know that the only traffic that's going out of the local internet is destined for Microsoft, though only those source IPs or domains. And so kind of get around the huge requirement of security by just using that. So that's the first test of the technology they've done. But also, like a few people said here, they're looking at more now, how do we operationalize it and get a lot more sophisticated? What they want to be able to see is all of these other applications that are going on our network, we don't know how they need to perform. So we don't know if they should go over the internet, stay on MPLS, how much bandwidth do we allocate for it, what prioritization do we put on it. And no one in the network group is going to go to each of the application owners and say, hey, is yours more important than your application? Right. So what they're looking for is some sort of discovery tool that will provide a tailored chart of all the applications and pretty much guide them down to where they should route that traffic and how much bandwidth should they allocate. And then potentially have a tool that will orchestrate that dynamically onto the network itself.
Interesting. The kind of the follow-on question was, what are the hurdles that are stopping adoption? It sounds like, from what you were saying, Yazdi, it's how does the integration work? How do I get awareness of what's happening? How am I able to manage my applications better to really work along the lines of SD-WAN? Any other thoughts? I heard security as well. There's a fear of security or openness, so to speak.
There's the fear of the cost that it would involve to make it as secure as they probably think it needs to be. So that's the big one. And so we're looking, like many other people, on the cloud security type products like the Zscaler. Now Blue Coat's got a cloud security as well. And then the promise of virtualization as well. People assume that's going to bring the price down. We haven't yet quite seen that happen because the cost of a license isn't that much cheaper than buying a hardware box. Customers are also challenged with the fact that now they've got one box potentially that could fail and that will affect everything rather than 3-4 boxes. So yeah, they're the main challenges going along with the customer's understanding of their own applications and their nervousness about how to route them correctly.
Yeah, I would, Michael said it earlier too, I think to follow on, I'm glad, I think it was accident where we started with the WAN optimization. The Riverbed solution gave us total transparency into, the protocols, the priority, the utilization of each of the protocols, and then we look every month in terms of, we have optimizations for certain protocols up to 70%, meaning 70% of LAN traffic is not getting out onto the WAN because of what the Riverbed's doing in terms of optimization. So that we applied directly in terms of what we're doing with the design for Viptela, for our SD-WAN solution. So having that view is absolutely critical in terms of the applications and the capacity.
So that solution seemed to work pretty well for you.
Yeah, yes.
I was just going to chime in on that point because I think sometimes when we talk about SD-WAN, the conversation naturally gravitates towards cost savings. But I think that was a perfect point, which is having the control and the flexibility of where your applications are at the edge and how they're performing. We're starting to see that emerge just as much as the security point, either the same or even more so than the cost savings. I mean, the cost savings are a great thing, right? Don't get me wrong. But the ability to truly control your application and the performance of that, when you have mission critical applications, your first point was what's the main driver? Well, more and more customers are digitizing because that's a competitive advantage. But if I go to a full digital strategy and yet I lose control of all these applications that are enabling that digitization, then I lose.
Right.
And so I think SD-WAN is a real enabler of the ultimate strategy.
It drives a requirement for each of those independent functions or business elements to work together.
Yep.
And so I would say that's because of that, that's a drive towards that digital enablement, digital transformation. It's not easy, right? So one of the early promises of SD-WAN is plug and play. You plug it in and it works. And because it's tied to many other IT and network functions, it's not that easy. It requires a level of sophistication both on the person, the group, the team, the company that's implementing it, and the organization that's going to be consuming those functions on an ongoing basis. So you can't just simply say you're gonna go with an SD-WAN strategy, hand it over, and it's done in 30 days. I would add that one of the key dependencies around implementation cycles and timeframes that we as an industry need to get better at is the attachment of SD-WAN as an over-the-top solution. So bring your own network, so that if you have a proof of concept site or 6 or 12 or 20 sites that you want to test this out, leveraging the current connectivity at those locations, whether it's call it third-party MPLS or internet connectivity, you can test the functions and the operating model that you're going to be experiencing. And so it's important when you're evaluating your providers that you're going to be working with, that you look at not only does it work with their networks, but does it work in an over-the-top model.
VYON, right?
That's right.
Michael, any thoughts on carry forward from that standpoint, just inhibitors?
I think readiness as a company plays an important factor. A lot of companies aren't prepared with their staffing numbers internally to move forward with a project like that. But I think that's what drives most folks to a fully managed solution, because it takes the burden of managing that project off of their internal employees, kind of puts it on whoever you're partnered with, right? And it saves them a lot of time that they could have their employees be working on other things, right? So, and above all, it's costs, right?
Right.
So.
Bill, just kind of carrying on with that thought, just in terms of organization. I know you may be looking at what your plan is. I don't know if you've thought that through yet, just because you're not at the full adoption stage. But are you having to shift the organization or plan to shift the organization to support the new environment, or just maybe describe how that's affecting you from company perspective?
Yeah, we definitely, I think one of the early presentations this morning, you know, I own data center network as well. We're talking wide area network, different team actually. But we're actually recruiting, you know, people from software development that are interested in coming into infrastructure. We have a couple of those guys with very good people, very good in terms of, you know, programming languages, you know, working on network, and they're part of the network team today. So we've seen really good success with that. The current team, and we do this in-house, by the way, our current contracts with AT&T and Verizon, they provide a managed service, you know, to the router. We're taking that away, again, based on a few years of experience. It's just, we didn't see the value add for the additional cost. So in this new set of contracts following the RFP, we're going to have that managed in-house. And we'll probably have, as the case is in the data center, some individual point solutions with other companies that can help us either after hours monitoring or, you know, consultancy, something of that nature. But the current team is really shifting to support the SD-WAN as they learn about Riverbed and the WAN optimization and everything else. So we have that skill set. As I told my boss, we're going to have some very highly skilled, highly talented network people next year over and above what we have today. So we need to think about, you know, retention and you know, it's good. Good problem to have, I think.
Yazdi, any organizational issues or shifts going on?
Yeah, just as Bill mentioned, I mean, in our typical telecom managed service production, we normally have a service desk for MPLS, a service desk for LAN, a service desk for the security components, and then we'd have an overarching sort of first level help desk that would help coordinate everything. But in the move to SD-WAN, that's not going to work. So we are reskilling, upskilling, cross-skilling people to become SD-WAN analysts and service desk people. And for most of them, that's a really, really good opportunity for them because they're seeing that as no longer am I just going to be looking at a router all day long. I'm going to be across the whole range.
Retraining, which
Correct.
is a great opportunity.
It is.
Like you said. Any other thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I would add. So we had real learnings in that regard.
Right.
When we first stood up our SD-WAN solution, we stood up a fit-for-purpose SD-WAN group. That's all they did. And it was a small but mighty team. And I referred to them as being heroic because they would, you know, look under every piece of paper, everything to try and get services delivered and managed. That can't scale. And so what we had to do is we moved that fit-for-purpose team into the broader operations team because customers were employing them as more hybrid networking. And so these were the experts that understood MPLS and internet and wireless and SD-WAN. And so we upskilled that team to increase the throughput. But it wasn't just about increasing the throughput. It was about reducing the customer touch points along the way. Because the one thing that will frustrate the customer more and more is asking the same thing over and over just to get to a specific milestone. And so it's moving from this, our CEO will commonly say, it's not about the milestone, it's about the business outcome. And we got focused early on around the milestone and not the business outcome. And so that cultural shift is in full swing. And so much so we've seen an increase through the first, I'd say 2.5 quarters of this year by about 3 times the number of orders that we can go put through the factory. And we expect that to increase an additional 3 times between now and the end of the year. With a reduction in customer touch points along the way so that it leads to improved employee experience and an improved customer experience.
That's great. I wanted to make sure we had enough time for some questions from the audience, so I'm going to go ahead and pause and see if anybody had any specific questions for the panel here. Let's see. Come on, somebody ask a question.
Can't see.
Or I'm going to carry on with another question.
It's like looking into the tunnel.
All right, all right, exactly. So I think, Adam, you just touched on a little bit of kind of the back office support and possibly some automation that could be happening. Bill, have you looked at automation as part of the solution here and how that might be impacting?
For sure. I didn't say it to your other question that from an organization standpoint, you know, being able to centrally configure and deploy those configurations is really going to cut down in terms of the resource time that we have and I think from SD-WAN, but everything we've learned from just managing the WAN is in its entirety. We've got a BMC, BNA, BMC network automation we use for remote configuration of routers. And of course, with Riverbed, we've got an ability from a central console to do changes and things of that nature. So we quite a bit, to be honest. And that's, I think, from what's next. You can chase cost takeout to the bottom, but there is no bottom in that. So, we're looking across the board and within the data center at all kinds of dynamic automation that we do today. Yeah. Mostly around, not mostly or entirely, but configuration, provisioning, the speed at which we provision. I mentioned just it'll get fixed, but the time it takes to get broadband internet from the providers today, that obviously has to improve. Once we have that, we're able to quickly get the circuits provisioned, being able to deploy the appliances, the router switches, whatever is going to be key.
Got it.
Do that pretty quickly today.
Got it. Jason, I know you had some thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, if I add to that, one of the maybe unique perspectives I bring to the panel is I own the channel for Cisco. So I have, in any given year, somewhere between 45,000 and 60,000 partners, resellers globally that are in my channel. And two of the profiles that I think we see emerging, to your point of there is a policy element to this. So it's not just automation for automation's sake. It's automating to apply some sort of a policy. And so we're seeing more and more consultant-style partners emerge who are willing to offer business policy creation that can be translated into that network design or into pushing that automation out. I think the other area that we're seeing in this SD-WAN context is something called circuit analysis. And so we talked about some of the RFPs and the ability to split the management layer with the transport. More and more I'm seeing partners like Complete Communications is a great example of a company who's doing this. They will go out and actually do a full circuit analysis for a customer and show you where there are opportunities to change who your provider is in certain markets, and they'll do that on a global basis. So I think there's new partner types. So it's not just internal to customers. Where I think we're seeing the skill set shift. I think you're also seeing the landscape of a channel like mine crop up with new business models and partner types.
Got it. Yazdi, in terms of, again, automation, monitoring the network, possibly provisioning, as Bill talked about, is that an element or component that you're looking at to gain advantage with?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the players that can automate on behalf of the customer are the ones that are going to win this race completely.
Right.
I think one of my smaller customers said to me, I'd love to be in the position where we don't have to employ CCNAs or anyone with a certification. We just want to get a box with a nice screen that we can configure from a business perspective, and all the great, no offense, CCIE people work for Cisco, not work for our company. So that's their vision.
Okay. And it sounds like that there's the path toward that vision, at least, again, the promise. Michael, just in terms of your perspective, managing the network, the team, are they using automated tools to?
Absolutely, yeah. So our network monitoring tools, they're obviously monitoring that circuit or circuits deployed out on every single site. If we sense that one of those circuits go down, we have an automatic tool that pops up. It creates a ticket in our system, and that customer gets those alerts, obviously. So they can see it happen from when the inception of the problem all the way to its resolution. I mean, another thing I'd like to talk about and touch on with automation, our platform, you can actually decide what traffic that circuit is provisioned for. So you can say, okay, I want to dedicate 3 megs to voice, and all the other traffic, gets the rest of the circuit. But if it's not being used if voice isn't using up that 3 megs, that bandwidth can be dedicated to other traffic automatically, right? So it's important. It's at the heart of our strategy, honestly. Automation is.
Got it. Well, I think we're coming up close to the end here. I'll check one more time from the audience, see if we have any following questions right here. We got one.
So one question,
Hold on.
And
So
direct your question if you have a panel person.
actually, it's to everyone.
Okay,
I'm
all right.
just curious. So there's many different perspectives up on the panel. What are, from your perspective, what are the top 3 things to consider to ensure a successful network transformation from your perspective?
I'll start. I think making sure security is embedded. I guess if I go back to the beginning, secure, intelligent platform, making sure security is embedded into the solution. It's intelligent, meaning that automation is end-to-end. I know we've focused a lot on SD-WAN, but when we talk about network, that should include your Wi-Fi, your switching, et cetera, your SD access. If you can apply a policy that flows end-to-end, I think that's a key consideration. And then is it open? Can you truly customize it? If the ultimate intent is to drive your digital strategy, can you customize it for that vertical or use case?
I would say know your business and the business requirements, where the company needs to go. Don't do a network transformation for technical sake or transformation sake. So that was really a big driver for us. And then having the organization model, whatever you decide, or operating model, if you're going to manage it in-house, or you're going to partner with somebody, a managed service provider or carrier or whatever, making that decision, or at least have a good understanding of what would drive that decision. And then really just going through, I think, a very detailed process and looking at the different solutions. However you do that, pilot, RFP, a combination of that.
I'd say it starts with your goals, right? What are your enterprise goals, and what is IT agility going to do to enable you to meet those goals? Whether it's cost reduction, whether it's revenue, new revenue channels, customer enablement. If you can start with IT agility, then you have 2 other things that you need to consider, and that is one that we talked about here, which is connected security. It's not a point solution. You need to understand at what points in the network security needs to be a prominent point of your solution. There are end user or site specific security parameters that are required for certain data encryption standards to transmit data from perhaps a remote location into a data center, into the servers. Other points security solutions need to be as deep into the network as possible. Closest to the origin of attack, whether it's a denial of service attack, so connected security. And then the third, which we're talking about in this whole forum, is around adaptive networking. No longer is it good to have fixed networks, fixed contracts, where you procure 10 megs, and that 10 megs is going to get you through the next 3, 5, 10 years. So your network has to adapt with your changing business needs. And that gets us back to how we kicked this off, right? Which is the cloudification of the enterprise and the needs of your business and what that means to the data set that you're managing.
I'd like to add a little bit to that. Know where your locations are based on the carrier's network infrastructure. So don't base your minimum bandwidth requirement on something that might be unobtainable in some areas or regions of the country.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Bill was saying, I think you need to know why you're moving that technology. What's the business reasons? What are you trying to do better? We have one customer that I think they just went with the whole, let's move to the internet because we hear everyone's doing it. And they're putting MPLS back in right now because certain key applications just wouldn't function well enough over the internet. So just think about why you're going down this road.
We see that all too often.
You do, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, any others? I think we're good. Well, thank you very much for the perspective. Oh, we got one here. Let's see. Sorry, right here.
Do you see SD-WAN taking more of a place over MPLS in the future?
I think someone asked it earlier in terms of MPLS, going away. It definitely is going to, based on your business, healthcare, financial services, et cetera. That's not happening. That won't happen. MPLS is part of the SD-WAN solution for us. So it's utilizing is guaranteed delivery with the lower cost internet, lower cost broadband. So we don't see that going away or replacing it.
The amount of traffic on the MPLS network will start to decrease, but it's not going to go away totally.
I could not agree more.
I agree with that.
We're
completely.
seeing it, as customers look to grow. I mentioned earlier, right? There's geographic expansion, there's bandwidth expansion, and the addition of resiliency. And so there's the addition of internet-based connections that are replacing what may have been an MPLS expansion, private network expansion, but it's not holistically removing it. In fact, we're seeing to the deals that we've sold to date, 90% of those deals are tied to an MPLS network. About half of those are net new MPLS networks, which that percentage, that blows me away. These are customers that are adding private connectivity to help bolster their current IT demands.
All right. Well, I want to thank our panel for the broad perspective and input. Very thoughtful. Thank you very much. And round of applause for the panel.